Due to the podcast.
Immediately. Welcome to the Story of the Apprentice podcast, where we only talk about D&D and nothing else, Dunker.
Ever.
Um, uh, I am Jesse T. William, and with me, as always, is my host.
Wait, I have to think about this one. Tunk? Can't stop hunk? Get funk.
If it wasn't 1:16 a.m. right now,
Mhm.
I would do my own rendition,
Oh, I'm
but
a little
I have
sad.
someone sleeping. I
Um,
don't want to wake.
oh yeah, it'd be a lot of yelling, I bet.
I capitalized
Capitalized.
those letters for a reason. Um, Chunk, I am edging right up to the
Why do you have to say it?
to the very end. I'm coming so close to the end of.
Yep. Yeah.
I thought about that one a couple of minutes ago, and I was just hoping to destroy you with it. Um,
My
we're,
fucking God.
we're so close to the end of, yeah,
Oh, look
eight
at it.
campaigns by how many weeks? It's the 6th of, in like a month and another 3 weeks. It'll probably be done. That's like 250 some sessions. That's a very long campaign. It obviously those weren't all week to week, but all of those stories happening in one. Um, I honestly don't know where I want to. I have thoughts actually, but I don't know where I really want to go with that. I just knew where I wanted to start with it. Um, do you have any thoughts? Do you have any D&D thoughts?
I know we had a lot last time
We did.
we
We had a
talked.
good moment. We had a good episode last episode.
That we had a lot to say.
Is this
Maybe
episode
I
going to be
even
good?
had too much to say, potentially. Like,
We
holy
should have
shit.
shut the fuck up at some point, honestly.
Yeah. And I just didn't. I decided not to. Why is I looking in this notebook? Like that's the notebook I would have kept those notes in. Fucking
I
idiot.
do have, ooh, I remember a good one, but it also might be right in front of me. It's over here. Read the
Oh wait.
fucking description. Read the fucking
Read the
description.
fucking
Read the
description.
fucking description.
God damn it.
I
Holy shit. Don't just read. So read I okay, when you go to start playing
read the description of the game.
and you
Read the
click on a
description
game,
of the GMs.
yeah, there's
I'm
all
being
this
loud.
fucking nifty ass information that tells you about the world you're playing in, what you need,
Mm-hmm.
what level you're starting at,
Mm-hmm.
generally the amount of like combat
Mm-hmm.
and story and like roleplay there's gonna be. All this information packed into one fucking place. All this information about like
That
where's it gonna happen? Are we using any like additives? And then on top of it, you can click on the DM's profile and you can read about that DM.
and we all painstakingly input that info for accessibility for players. And what
Make
happens?
your life easier.
Tucker, what happens? 57% of the time.
And I'm going to shoot them off here. What level are we starting at? Do you use Roll20? How many? What are we? Are you running a book? What are we? Or like, and then it's like stuff like, oh, like, oh my God, like 10 just hit my brain at once. 10 just hit my brain at once. And then the worst thing. And then the
In the
worst thing
screen, I have a second mic, fuckers.
is like I tell everybody about this. I was in a situation where I had somebody join my games, and I just like I was compelled. Oh my God, excessive and unnecessary. I was compelled to be like, did you read my DM description, by the way? I don't know what specifically made me do that. But now it's
The
like
vibes are
I will
there
do it
sometimes.
every time. Yeah, now it's like I'm going to start doing this every time. It's like when I used to work at Starbucks and they'd say they want to try, and people would be like, "Well, our default is hot, so we'll just give them a hot." No, you always fucking ask if they want that iced because they don't know. They're not. And then they'll get to the window and they're like, I wanted this iced. And you're like, okay. Same thing. Um, and like I just felt the need, and I'm very like I'm pretty like on my DM page, like in my description, I have like my bottom paragraph is just being like, I specify that I'm trans. And then my bottom paragraph is just being like, you know, I'd like to create like a safe and inclusive environment um for like people of color and queer people. Um, you know, like feel free to join if you're not any of those groups, but just know that like racism, homophobia, transphobia, like misogyny, ableism, all like will not be tolerated here. And I answered that person that I asked. I get a message that's like, oh, um, I didn't read it all the way through, and I will not be joining these games because of listed below. And I just like thank fucking God I asked before I put myself in proximity with that fucker. um, and then but it was there was a little bit of a good thing because like I asked the same. I had two people try and join that game the same day, and I asked the second guy, and he was like, "Yeah," but now I feel like did I miss something? Because I was like, just make sure some people have some issues. uh, and he went and read it over again. He goes, "What part did he have an issue with?" And I said, "The last part." And he goes, "Oh, what the fuck?" And so that person kind of like restored me a little bit because they had read it and then even went back and read it when I asked them. Um, and because they were like confused, they were like, I didn't see anything in there that would be a problem. I don't get it. And I was like, you're so good. Shout out to AJ. What a fucking wonderful human being. Really, really great individual. But and it just like if you would have just read the DM description, you would have known.
Communication. Um, I don't even know what the term is for just literacy. I guess it's just literacy. The ability to read is important. Just scroll and read. Those are basic
Mhm.
human functions in this age.
Yeah, yeah. But I always get like a bunch of questions that are very like it's like again, like do you use like Roll20 or whatever the fuck? What level are we starting at? Is this a 3.5? Like no.
It answers all those fucking questions.
Yeah. It just you know what? That also brought something to mind. Something that you used to talk about that I didn't really like at first. I was like, I don't really know like were you were talking about people using pre-made characters for campaigns at some point. I had a moment like that too, where I was like, oh, there's something a little bit like about it because I'm like, the lore's too specific for that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need no, you're gonna need to change it. And that's like a thing that'll happen too. Somebody will approach me. They won't even like join a game first. They'll just like message me and be like, I have this idea. Some
Yeah.
stranger. You know what I mean?
I've gotten that too recently. I had someone um message me, and this is also my longest running. This is the campaign that has the most sessions. It's around 50.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a person like 2 weeks ago. The campaign's almost fucking over. And the person just opens up a message being like, "Hey, do you all have room for a something something druid?" And I was like, I didn't respond, but in my head I was like, what? Like that? I just don't like the like tone and approach of the question,
Mm,
because, especially because that game as well, by its description, is very political. It's not anymore because it's war. There's not been a lot of politics happening recently
wow.
in
Just
Fulia.
killing.
Just murder and death. But it's just like it's I can tell it's just that person's probably going around being like, this is the character I want to play. And um hopefully messaging multiple DMs and not one at a time, waiting for each one to respond. Um, but goddamn, I do. But okay, and to be fair, I think it's just like also my brain's doing layers.
Mhm.
You
What are
need
they
to get your
fun?
TikToks going, Tucker. You need to get your
I
TikToks
know.
going.
I
Um,
know.
because I with my application thing, I made 2 videos. I received 7 applications and 2 videos with not a lot of views. 7 applications. I responded to 2 of them. One of them like yesterday or today, and I've already received a response from the person like expressing interest. So I have a new player through that, which is tight. But that's also like how I'm going to probably manage player intake for the next campaigns as I like lose a couple of players. And it is so helpful to just see everyone's answers to like sometimes leading questions of like, these are your 4 options of play. Like, what do you want? Because it's also written in a way. I feel like I wrote this application that's like basically to see like what everyone's interested in game, and it's written in a way that if for example, of like, oh, what kind of gameplay do you prefer? Do you just want to be around a table and have fun with friends? Do you want to tell a story? Yada yada yada. Um, and it feels like people who have those other answers, who like do want to like just be at a table and like goof off, are like very comfortable like pressing them. Like no one's felt like, oh, I'm going for the right answer to get into a game, because they don't know, if they don't know. And so it's been a great way to like weed out candidates and like get potentially good players. I'll see how this first one is, but they seem like they are good. Um,
Mhm.
so you gotta get on that. I don't fucking open my games anymore. You gotta apply, motherfuckers. I'm high class.
I'm not, I'm not too high class yet. Yet. Um, I do feel like that's something that would be a little bit beneficial for me because I've noticed that there's like such a specific way that I run things. Ah, I almost wish I could do like, and I'm like, I did this for my Saturday game. Um, this was partially due to younger David's recommendation. Time. Shout out, little David.
Yeah, little David.
uh, little David. I was that's it. That's all I'm gonna call him from now on.
Both of us just
And
casually be like, yeah, what up, little David?
uh, little David, who, by the way, also he's also in that Saturday game that I've told you how much I enjoyed that game.
Mm,
Uh, love that individual. Has been very helpful for me for a few different projects I've been working on. Actually, he knows he's so knowledgeable.
mm,
Um, and we're like we did like part of the session 0 was just me answering questions, and then I would just split off with them. And I almost preferred that. And it's almost at this point where I'm like, I'm about ready to do like constellations because there's like an aspect of I have some players because we already know I tend to run my games a little bit more like personal.
mm,
And I'm gonna make you can be a main character, sure. Fuck yeah, whatever. I'm here to explore. I'm a character study person at my heart, through and through, That gets me, grips me. But God, there's a lot of I feel like weird sexual innuendo with
it just really
this
grips
bug.
you.
Just really
Yeah.
grabs you.
Finish it. Finish it. Where does it grab you?
No, no, thank you.
Where does
I've
it grab
decided
you?
I'm rethinking. I'm
If
going to be
you don't
responsible
say
and
it,
think before I say things. And so, um,
grabs you by the pussy.
there is like some people who like, yeah, they want a character study. They want an arc.
Mm,
And they want me to be involved. And I'll sit there and I can sit there and talk to them about like, okay, what are the vibes moving forward? And there's some people who just want to be like tossed around. They're like, yeah, a good deep character, but like go fucking crazy, like take liberties.
mm,
And then there's some people who are like, I'll engage in the world and I'm not going to be a disturbance, but ultimately, like, they're not making like a character who is, I guess, like going through an arc or like, they kind of stay in a place. And sometimes I just don't like, I'm like, what are you looking for? What do you want? Right. So at this point, I'm just going to ask you directly, what do you want? Um,
People don't always know. That's the
no,
thing.
they don't. And so I'm trying to just like feel it out as I go with certain players, present different things to them, go, no, okay, what about this? As we go and just see how it plays out.
Mm.
um, but God, especially with people just not reading that description. Now, luckily, it feels like I kind of like am able, like I have enough intuition to kind of suss it out,
Yeah,
you
you
know?
can. There's a weird like text tone that you can kind of tell or like shorthand that people who don't really care are invested or not even invested, but like might be a shitty person have. Where as soon as they send a message, you're like, ooh.
Yeah,
Like there's one I
you can
told you
feel
about.
it.
I won't get super specific because they did end up playing in a game for a while, but like literally the moment they messaged me, I was like, I don't think I like you. And then the player was less, it was not a good fit for my game, is what I'll say. Um, uh, anyways, sorry.
Yeah.
I want to let you finish a thought because I so badly want to speak. Um, I have little thoughts swishing around in
All
my
over the
head.
place.
Um,
Well, I I have a lot of thoughts as well. However, mostly it's the core of the message is read.
fucking read, fuckers.
You read. That's it.
Read,
Just do
motherfuckers.
your due diligence. You know, you don't need to waste anybody's time. They don't need to waste. Respect your time as well.
Yeah.
All right. Because like and so I guess part of it doesn't make sense to me because I remember even when I saw you on TikTok and like seeing you on TikTok already and watching your TikToks for a while, I had a fairly like good idea, and I still went through and like read everything possible before I even
Mm,
joined the game. Like I went, read the entire way through, went and read your DM description. I was like, okay, sick. Um, so I just don't get it. But just read and to anybody watching who's like, I want to start DMing and start playing, just ask them, double check that they've read it. Especially, and here's the thing though, and this is what kind of like got me about it. Especially if you're a person of color and that is not like explicitly seen in your profile thing, like the icon, especially if you're queer, ask and you list it on that DM like
mhm.
page, ask. Um, don't like to look for like thinking about what it might have been like if that person came to that realization like
Mhm.
then like after they had joined is not something I enjoy pondering. That is the moral of the story. That is the core message.
Um, pondering your core message for a moment. Um, uh,
Mhm.
I have nothing of value to add. Good message. Um, something you said earlier about the way you characters engage in like their arcs or whatever. Um, a couple of things actually. One is that you made me kind of reflect on what I do. And it's weird as a DM or a person actually. Just it's weird to be a person and to reflect on yourself in any positive light. Because inherently, you know, you must hold a view of yourself that is horrible and terrible. Because me as a person must be horrible and terrible. But
And you are,
yeah,
as somebody
thank
who
you.
knows you personally.
Thank you for the affirmation. It's very validating. Thank you. But the way I was thinking about how do I run arcs for characters? Because like a lot of what I do is very in the moment, it's very improv. I don't plan for people's arcs generally. I might put little things, but even then, like I have no plans. In a like small scale sense or moment to moment sense, like the Lorna thing that happened on Sunday with her father. I knew her father was going to be there. I didn't know I was going to murder him. And then I didn't know he was going to refuse to be brought back. But I saw this opportunity, which is also, I I don't
I
take
mean, I
notes.
think that it's like sometimes it's not even like about writing the arc, but kind of knowing like if a player is looking for that sort of
Mm. Well,
fulfillment and satisfaction.
yeah. I One thing I need to do better, because I don't take notes during sessions, but I'm going to like really overhaul how I take like taking notes, just period, when I get into the new arcs or new campaigns to specifically accommodate like, oh, a little moment happened here. Because the way I end up doing arcs or accommodating arcs for characters is that there's the theme of the campaign, and the theme is going to produce encounters that sometimes effectively explore whatever element, sometimes don't, and then there's a opportunity for a character to reflect. So I'll say, and I'll try to usually give a frame that's specific to the character of like, you've experienced X and X and now you've experienced X. How do you how's the character feel? And then sometimes I make decisions based off of those answers, or I'll connect revelations or whatever, and that's how I build arcs. It's very like in the moment. It's what's developed in my like improv style, um, which I think I want to speak more. The reason I'm bringing this up is themes. I think something that I think definitely on like you see on like higher level D&D or TTRPG mediums talking about like what are the themes of this thing that we're engaging with. I don't know if uh how common like the common person uses the concept of like a theme in a game. I just don't know. Like not just a like motif of like, oh, this is a heist campaign, but it's like if you're going to add meaning to this is a heist campaign about greed, and so how do you use greed to push buttons with characters and create character moments or catalyze character moments, or there's another word I'm looking for. I'm gonna move on. Um, but the way that um, when I build settings now, because I'm building a lot, I structure them around the idea of it has a central theme and a story that emerges from that theme. Like for Savendum, it's about ego. It's a story about ego and lies. It's about shitty people. Where Flia is very much about like the best of people. Savendum is about the worst and trying to find. I have a really weird tangent. I'm going to go on to explain this. So, the Dark Knight. Um, there's a
Okay.
very interesting way that the Joker. I hate. I don't. I'm not someone who's a fan of like the Joker as a character as a concept, and this is not a compliment to Chris Nolan either. This is actually a kind of rag on how I think Chris Nolan might view people. But there's a moment that it was very um, stuck out to me when the last time I watched it. Um, that to me was like, oh, that's a little bit of like the writer or like the artist being shown through their artwork and maybe not knowing it.
Mm.
Where the Joker talks to this cop about like people's principles and how easily they break. And I'm like, those people aren't very mature who you are talking about. But that is like the worldview of the character and of the story in the world. And I think of Chris Nolan as well. I don't think Chris Nolan, he doesn't strike me as someone who's like deeply connected with humanity, the way he makes films. Um, and so I was like, this is a incorrect like perspective. This is a flawed perspective, which I suppose like the movie does kind of show, but not in a way of like that really understands what the way
Mm.
I was viewing that conversation. But I think that's what this like story is more like, where it's like these people do not have the like good intentions or like structures that provide them with like good hearts. They are fundamentally like bad people. They're egotistical. They are flawed. Um, but they're also like, and that's kind of an open question of like, are they deserving of this worst thing, this like evil entity, for them just being kind of like assholes? Like, do they deserve this degree of damnation? Um, but that's like a very, very good structure for me to build off of and to play around with in the different contexts, because Savednam, the story, is going to take place over like 12 settings over the course of like at least a year, if not like two and a half. Um, so anyways, themes. I feel like using themes very intentionally provides a easier um access point to characters' arcs without doing the work of like sitting down with every single player and being like, what is your character's arc? Because not everyone thinks like that. Not everyone has the foresight. Not everyone has the
No,
intention.
yeah. Which
And
is why
then,
sometimes I'm almost like sometimes it's like a thing of like I just got asked by my roommate if I want a quesadilla.
get the quesadilla.
Because
Say
sometimes it's
yes.
like a
Good food.
some people are very intentional, and I wish
Mm-hmm.
I maybe I just need to get better at spotting those motherfuckers,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that it probably does take a little bit more, not a little bit more, but like I want to be able to be present and kind of meet my players halfway and engage in the things that they enjoy. Now, to be fair, um, part of that is because I don't necessarily have the luxury to be picky right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's not something I can do, but I still want people to enjoy my table if they're at it, regardless.
Yeah.
Because just because there's a game, an ideal game that I would prefer to play, doesn't make it a drag for me to run a game that's also just about like having fun
Yeah.
within the encounters. So it's not like really a rag on any players who don't function in that way. Like it's however you engage, however whatever is fun for you, have fun. It's a game. But I know that like I have more fun and I engage more meaningfully in like very story and narrative focused games. Not always. I've had plenty of fun in games that are just games.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, but I think with DMing, it is definitely more satisfying for me to go the more narrative route of DMing professionally. That is.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and so
you mentioned being having like suboptimal choice and like not being able to be picky, which I think is the thing that I benefited from. Although it's hard when you're just getting random people, especially in the scale that I was doing it, and continue to do it. But it's good
Well,
to
I don't
have a.
imagine. Yeah, I imagine there was probably a little less of you being picky at first.
Oh yeah, I wasn't
It's
picky at
just,
all. Like I took who I could
you were
get.
like, fuck it.
Yeah, it wasn't until like December, which was like almost like just a year into me trying to do this, that I was like, this player does not actually belong at my table, and I'm going to
Mhm.
remove them. Um, but it was good to have a general idea, right? A thing that was like very general, that was appealing to um people, and could be like bent to different parties, like based on their interests. But I had a very general thing that in the new campaigns, I can be much more specific. I can cater to parties and player needs much more intentionally and set up
Mhm.
arcs and encounters with the knowledge of who these people are who are in these encounters, which just was not a choice. I want to circle back around to you speaking though, because I was kind of interjecting there. Um, but you were talking about uh, players, arcs, players.
Hmm.
having to be
I like.
picky or not being able to be picky.
Well, I mean, and there's not really anybody playing in my games right now that I was like, I would boot you, you know?
Mm.
Like, I'm not like ready to kick any fucker out, but um, there's definitely a way to put it. I have like a very I'm one thing that I think that I'm fairly good at, and that if I had the like more time to do, I would do, right? Um where like I can really hone in on a character with like players. I'll sit there and talk about their character with like I can sit there and just like discuss as if we had just watched a movie and we were discussing the characterization of the fucking main character or the villain or whatever the fuck. I could sit there and talk about player characters like that, you know? Um, and so like it doesn't take a lot for me to become like invested, to be like, oh, this is very interesting and I want to see where this goes and I'd like to play it out, you know? Um, and I think that like in certain situations I can be really, really good at providing a experience that is very how do I put this? A wonderful example would be my home game, which like I created the entire most, not all of it, but the first iteration of this homebrew world that existed was created for them. And like so specifically too, right? Because like down to like silly small things like naming conventions. I created the rest of the naming conventions of these two major continents based on where these certain characters were from and their names, you know? And went from there. And like so many, like they were like, well, I want this in my backstory. And writing in a place where this thing exists and how it matches up with other things that they've been wanting and also where these other characters are from and what that means when these two different like cultures like intersect and when the political bodies like begin to butt heads and like really just went all out with that. I have like an incredible capability for that. I love the world build, first of all. It's like my favorite thing in the whole world. Um, and not that I could do that for everybody, obviously. This is the point, but I have the ability to kind of like hone in and be like, all right, like let's come up with something really compelling and then we'll play it out and see how it goes, you know? And I can provide a lot of attention. And then I end up feeling like in this sometimes, you know, there's certain players who are a little bit more willing to engage with me on that level. And I end up always feeling like, oh, I have so much more set up for this character in a fulfilling emotional way because I know a lot about them and this person has sunk a lot of time into them and not just sunk a lot of time into them, but sunk a lot of time into making them a part of this world, you know? Um, and really like sinking them into it and not just like a character that has been dropped in, but a real like breathing part of this world. um, and like I see where I start to tilt, you know, and I was like, but I can also like there's a level of like I can only I can partially only engage with some people like that, um, who almost like kind of initiate it, you know what I mean?
Mm.
Which takes a certain amount of like a social confidence because especially when you're playing with somebody you don't know, you're like, I do not want to fucking bother them. But also because like I don't get fucking paid to do all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would love to run smaller parties for more, you know what I mean? Like I think that there are some people who really value that kind of like small intimate party like feeling. It's just not something I can do right now. And that's part of like the pickiness is that if I could, I'd be running like I say this knowing my home game is 8 players. I don't know why I did that to myself. Uh, but like I'd run just like 4 or 5 people parties if I could, you know.
How
I
many
those are some of my favorites.
how many are your games set for now? Like what's the upper limit for your games?
6 because I was like I can't handle. It's a little bit easier in home games to handle more people. Um, on the internet, it's
Yeah.
different. I can handle a lot of people in person, but not a lot online.
7 has been surprisingly, even though like not all the games are set to 7, some of them are because like for whatever reason, sometimes somebody's friend says that they want to join a game. So I open up a spot, and then a player who's already in another one of my games sees that spot. It's like, can I join this campaign? And I go, no, I'm sorry. It's actually somebody's friend. Tucker, it's your friend. Um, so they're going to take this, and then that person doesn't join it. I'm like, well, you might as well take it. Actually, I didn't intend this campaign to be 7, but now it is, and it still works. It's still a good group of
There you
7.
go.
Um,
Look, he's technologically
he
challenged.
has another chance coming
He
up.
couldn't, he screamed at his iPad for one time because he couldn't figure out how to turn off like the voice thing, like where it talks everything at you, everything, and he just couldn't. It was like a whole ordeal because he couldn't turn it off. He doesn't know how to work anything ever. I had to go set up the Minecraft thing for him. I don't know how he makes it through life in 2023.
Mm,
How he like manages that as a
mm,
person. It's laughable.
mm.
um,
Um,
but yeah, shit happened again. I It's because I think I by default my brain default is to provide very intimate experiences. Um, and so
wait, no, let's sit on that for a moment. Sorry, I missed
yeah,
it. I
yeah.
was
If
thinking
you
of it
guys
like,
want a deeply
yeah,
intimate experience,
yeah. It's like I'd love to sign up for a deeply intimate experience. When do you
um,
schedule those?
Saturdays. um, but so that's the thing. I can do that easier with more players in person, but also
Mm,
because it made it much easier for players to entertain themselves at a table if they're right. Because like I allow side conversations up as long as you're
mm,
like quiet enough that I can still have this conversation that I'm having with a player and an NPC and not like if I'm saying things that are pertinent to the whole party, shut the fuck
yeah,
up. I used to
yeah.
have a speaker phone and I would do this thing where I would press the button and put it down, it would screech when I wanted them to shut the fuck up. I still have it somewhere. And
Some motherfuckers need to learn how to shut the fuck up because okay,
I had a moment earlier today where I was trying to talk and then I go, Jack, shut the fuck up.
I so on Sunday it was a 14 person crossover, and um there are moments. I think there's a I need to do a video on this. I don't want anyone to feel bad because it's not a managing time is my job. Managing player time is my job, and when you have things like that, it's very difficult. And because there's also like priorities in sessions that I have for players of like you are more important, even though sometimes you might have some story thing going on, and you also might be better at initiating story than maybe these other people. Um, uh, it's they need some focus.
This
Um,
person paid for the session.
yeah,
So
but
shut up.
uh, there are I will do this thing where I will go so, and nobody clues in. I go so.
I want you to know I do the same thing.
Mm.
I'll go so, and then somebody will say something. I'm like, oh my God.
What do you think that so was for? Do you think that was an opportunity for you to?
Yeah. That's to indicate to you. That's
Yeah.
your cue that
If I'm if
I
my
have
hand
something to
is
say now.
up, if my hand is up, shut the fuck up. It's that simple.
I have a player. You know who this player is, but
I know
I'm
who
not
this
going to
player is.
name him for this.
I think
Who
I already know. I think I already know this player listens and get called out, motherfucker.
here's the thing. Okay, I have 2 players,
Mm,
and they're both the opposite spectrums of this in the
mm,
same game.
mm,
And I try to manage it the best that I can. The last time we went on a tangent, I called it our 10 minute and I set a timer. I said, this is going to be our 10 minutes. And I set a timer. And that's like the break. Because sometimes I take breaks. Sometimes I don't
mm,
need to. But
mm.
sometimes I'm like, okay, let's take a 10. So I was like, this is our 10-minute break. This is how long we have to rag on Jack for his opinions about American chocolate. Um, and like, and me and Tice were just like, oh, I named him right then, just like
You knew who he was.
going crazy. But then there's Thomas, who's like consistent, and he almost manages player time for me sometimes. I
Mm,
feel bad. So I try to get better about it. Um, but sometimes it doesn't help that there's somebody in the party that ties their autism just like links up way too well. And I'm like, both of you quit
the
it.
autism feedback loop. It happens sometimes.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I unfortunately got caught in that in the American chocolate conversation of 2023. I don't even know how it came up in the session. That's the problem. Um, Jack said something. He said something British, and Americans hate America until somebody not from America says something about America, and then we're
Mm.
like, wait, fuck you. And that's how we function. And so like me and Tice immediately were like, excuse me, say that one more time. And I was like, fuck, this is gonna be a break.
Mm.
Um, but like I uh I was gonna mention how Thomas. I was like, I'm not gonna name them. I was like, here I am, I'm gonna name drop them. Thomas will consistently be like, let's stay on track. And I'm like, yes,
God,
Thomas.
he
Uh
hasn't had to do that in any of my sessions.
it's
I don't think.
yeah, I don't um it's not helpful that I try, and sometimes I will be like, okay, no more.
Mm.
That party, I told my Thursday game today when I told Jack to shut the fuck up. I said, I want you to know that it took you guys weeks to get to the point that I was with the early Saturday morning game, the first session, where I would just like it. I was very polite with these people. I think it helps that I knew Elijah. I knew him. He died. I
He's
know
dead.
Elijah. I know Tice. I played with Tice. I played with Thomas. The only person I didn't know, and Jack, and the only person I didn't know, and that was Ethan. That's one of Elijah's pals, and I kind of immediately felt the vibe. And so with these other people, there was a few more that I just didn't, you know what I mean, know very
Mm.
well. So I was like, I'm going to be very polite. That party with Thomas and Tice, I very quickly would be like, shh, shut your mouth. No more speaking. We're moving on. And but then on occasion I get stuck in the autism feedback loop.
Me too.
And it
That's also
happens.
me.
My cats are arguing. um,
Earlier, when we were
yeah.
on call before uh, the podcast, you were saying something like really important, I think. And as I was watching your cat from that little corner of the bed, where it's with the shelf there, was just like squeezing out, and I was like, um. Anyways, the thing I has been circling around in my head a little bit with player time has also been so it's something we were talking about earlier, which is about um we want we're trying to get players to make interesting choices. That is the goal. Is not to deliver interesting things to them, but for them to make choices that result in interesting things happening, which is an interesting framing to come across today, which is a flaw of the crossovers or parties being in proximity to each other. Because sometimes, as mentioning this to the Bunky Kuel, you experience a thing. I'll tell the story. I'll tell the whole story. I'll go through as quickly as I can now. So uh, there was a corrupted like Pope type person of Hope, the Hope Pope, and he was making his way to this big important meeting, and four parties intercepted him at the city where something bad was going to happen, and they were like, "Hello, Mister Hope Pope. Um, I'm so sorry, but I think things are not the way you think they are," and gotta to accept that. And they were like, "You're still the Hope Pope, though. You're still this figure. It's the way of hope to have this flaw." And he was like, "Oh shit, I am the Hope Pope." And so with a very, very high, it was like a 37 to get that
Oh
outcome
shit,
and
I
like
am the hope
very
hope.
good roll. The Hope Pope was like, I can be the Hope Pope. I can still find hope.
Mhm.
It's my job. That's my job. And so in the world, there are things called divine emissaries. So in my world, um, for those of you who played who know, gods do not meaningfully manifest. Gods are infinite and abstract, um, unless you are a celestial being, um, or super dead. Um, but brains. Oh, so they have things called divine emissaries. Divine emissaries are the manifestations of the god's will. Whatever the god wants, they represent the avenue to achieve that. Um, I feel like it's fine to keep talking, but I'm all,
Yeah,
oh, it's
no,
Casey to get
yeah,
sick. Okay, because
yeah.
I figured you were just closing the door or something. Um, but wonderful. But they represent an avenue for the gods to get what they want essentially, and they're very very powerful, more powerful than like your average extremely powerful D&D creature, because I run games at a scale for like, sessions sometimes with 14 players fighting an emissary. um so anyways, I have this moment happen for the Bunky Kuel where you show up in a city, and this happened for the other party, and it was awesome because they were like, we did this, but you show up in a city and you see the divine emissary and it's controlling people's minds and everything. And I was trying to like, I was going for, because I knew I was going to like do the switch, but I was trying to give a sense of hopelessness, but I didn't have a whole lot of time in the session also to achieve it because it was like coming to an end. And so I didn't really have time to sit in that. And we're also like missing players. It was just generally like not a great setup. Um, and then the Hope Pope pulls a divine intervention because he's 20th level cleric. He's one of like 5 in the land who can do that. He pulls a divine intervention. And the emissary goes away. And so for the other party, it was like, fuck yeah, those are our choices. But for the Bunky Kuel, it was like, okay, we talked to the Hope Pope. We didn't
Oh,
really get the context
sick.
here.
I don't have to fight anything today. Crazy.
um,
I can live a little bit longer.
yeah. um, but yeah, we want players to make interesting choices. I was going to connect this to another feeling, and maybe I'll find it if I just express it. But that tangent took a
What?
something off the track. You gonna say something?
I was gonna say, and another thing for me also is like a thing of like I wish I could and sometimes I feel like just very directly telling players like you can push a little,
Mm,
you can push me a little, you can
mm,
make decisions that are a little like don't be afraid,
mm,
I'm not gonna bite you, like it's okay. Go make that, ask like this is you know who made me have this realization a little bit. Flip. Sometimes Flip will just ask you like, can I do insert crazy thing here?
yeah.
Um, and Flip has like no fear. And for some players, it's a really anxiety inducing like
Mm,
feeling. To ask to, especially if it's something that may not always fit within the parameters of 5e
mm-hmm.
as a like system.
Yeah.
And like as the set of rules go. um, I know it's really anxiety inducing for some people, but Flip just like, can I do insert crazy bullshit? Is there a way for me to insert crazy bullshit? And I was like, damn, the confidence that Flip has to just like, let me fuck shit up.
Mm,
Um, is like, uh, that like made my brain do a
yeah.
thing.
It's players who do things like that like have defined the campaign. There's like 2 or 3 in particular. One of them is Flip.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is Flip's Mudlock pal, Plyborn, the player who just the session got moved. The session time got
I
moved
think,
from Wednesday to
yeah,
Friday. But
but Plyborn really has stuck with. I only saw him in like one game, and that's like a character that is like stuck
yeah,
with me throughout the
yeah,
entire campaign.
you saw him in like
And he's dead
2 or 3.
now.
You were just super emotionally clocked out for the second or third time.
Yeah, I was.
But yeah, so them, and then Elder Elijah, um, and his decision, and so those are the kinds of things that I reward. Is because there's a couple of things going on, especially with Flip. They're a great example, which is they're very bought into the world. They're meaningfully just stop giving me notifications, computer. They meaningfully engage with the story,
Hmm.
and their backstory, and they're willing to make big decisions.
Hmm.
Um,
Flip has
uh,
given me a lot more confidence moving forward
mm,
with that kind of thing. Um, like seeing somebody else in that position makes you like, ah, okay. I
mhm,
think it's very helpful. Like people who are big decision makers. I think that there's some people who never really like leaped that, but I know that
yeah,
for other people, myself being one, it was kind of that experience that made me like, okay, yeah.
yeah,
Um, because for ah, okay, preface this. None of my players are these kind of people, I think, but there are definitely some people who make big decisions. There is such a thing as making a big decision and it being a bad big decision
mhm,
that like kind of derails, you know?
yeah,
Um, but it's kind of like you said, where Flip is so meaningfully engaged with the world and their backstory and that kind of thing. It really pulls it together. So even though Flip will be like, "Can I do the crazy bullshit?" It's still like within parameters, I guess. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like it's not so
It
like
like
where
makes
the fuck would you pull
sense.
that from?
Yeah,
um, and like that, I think that's the difference. Um, and like so there's a difference in players, like the two different types of players that'll make really big decisions, but then also, you know, people who can't kind of meaningfully engage enough to make decisions like that. And then there's motherfuckers like me, where it's like, I don't know these people that well, and I have anxiety, and I don't want to take up too much space. And I've met quite a few more players in the time through your games and mine, where I have conversations with them, and there is a, well, I don't want to take up a bunch of space. And that always makes me feel kind of like sad, I guess, of like, you're paying for this. You
yeah,
can take up a little bit of
yeah,
space. This is something you pay for.
yeah.
If you have a thing to do it.
There's a element on that specific note, which is I think the best way to engage in a paid game is that um if you are two things. The one thing I wish every player would learn um uh and internalize is that when you open a conversation, have a point and get to that point as quickly as you can while getting as much as you need.
Yeah, still retain the meaning of it, but
Yeah,
get the point.
but yeah, like I notice, and the thing that I'm gonna try to wrap this all up in a neat little bow. I can't believe I'm still somewhat a little bit on topic, but on managing player time, um,
Um,
sometimes people will just, because I want people to make interesting choices. That's what I'm trying to get people to do, and you don't always need to do that. It's, admittedly, this campaign has been a little bit past fast paced because I've had to accommodate the like
yeah.
last, or like the first campaign pushing everything forward. But I'm like structuring the next campaign to give people more time to like experience the life and get into the world and the characters more. But um I will get frustrated, and not in a way that's like necessarily fair to the player, but me as a DM, like a flaw of mine is to be like, shut the fuck up and do something important. Like I just have this horrible like just like this doesn't matter. Um which in a grand scheme of things, in the like, is this important to the story? Does this move things forward? Is this an interesting choice? Um Although none of those things are hit, but it doesn't mean it's not important, or can't be important, or can't be valuable, perhaps is the word. Um, but in like the very, very specific context that I'm
Yeah.
running Falia in, I get that feeling not all the time, but fairly frequently.
I think that continue.
Oh, fairly frequent to the point where I'm very aware that it's just like some things deserved more time. And again, just by the
Mhm.
nature of the way the game was set up, it's had to be pushed away. And that's an artifact of that, and not in crossover contexts. It's a little on the player to be like, please be mindful that while you're having this conversation with another PC or an NPC, that there are 12 people watching you who might also have something they want to do. Um,
Mhm.
so but
I feel
so
like
it's
I've gotten more mindful of that as I've started DMing. I
yeah.
feel like at the beginning of Bunky, I could just like blah, 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 blah. And now I'm like, this is Surveil's point, the end. Leave me the fuck alone
At the
about it.
beginning of Bunky, there was a very different vibe though, because it was like
Yeah.
you're a single party, and we're not yet getting to the point where I needed to push you out of
Yeah. We
Venudri.
also weren't always in danger all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
the vibes in general were just
Mm-hmm.
different. I mean to say that in comparison to like some people can still kind of carry on those bits in crossovers. Um, Maybe I'm just not like a huge bits person anymore. We're
I
like
noticed
this.
with your role play, you are very like you're very thoughtful and very like mindful of narrative and story.
I'm
In a
trying.
way that I'm starting to be like, oh, I really like when Tucker talks. I really like when Tucker's playing his character because it feels like something, not getting on track necessarily, but I feel like something is being engaged with, the buttons being pressed that maybe not every player always presses. And again, a lot of that is set up. A lot of that is my fault. A lot of it is um, putting myself in a situation where I was throwing eight parties in one of two directions.
Yeah. I
Um,
I mean it is definitely like a thing that I'm purposefully doing. And that's partially because like I also missed time during the Tucker dark times,
mm,
dark ages, when I just like was so emotionally locked out because I was so exhausted all the time. And so I wasn't present in the games. Sometimes I think about it, I'm sad about it because like fucking Geiger had died, and I was like, what? Well, huh? You what? I like didn't like process it when it was happening. I was like, oh, that would have made me. If I was there, I would have been fucking like emotionally devastated. But um, and so once I kind of came back, there was like a thought for me where I was like, I still want to like meaningfully engage in this world with this character, and like I kind of missed a chunk there where things were
mm,
ramping up too. Things were really
mm,
ramping up, and I just missed like a whole chunk. So I was like, I'm going to make an active choice to try and really engage meaningfully with this character. Um, which also includes some of the setup just being for me,
mm.
and things I've thought about and like, you know what I mean? Uh, and so that was like a very, it's, I'm glad it comes across because I'm trying to be thoughtful with what I'm doing. Um, that's important to me. Um, I think, I think because I understand. I don't think that I'm as much like do something important as you are. However, I do understand the feeling a little bit.
Well,
I've
it's me because I'm on a schedule
Yeah,
to end things from a session standpoint, and also like all these end together. All these need to get to the same place. You
yeah.
are with other parties, and the I feel that feeling mostly just when it is crossover time, and I'm like, why is this conversation happening right
And
now?
I think that's to be honest, I think it's a lot of just parties being excited to interact.
Yeah.
Um, which oh no, how terrible. They're having fun. Um, but it generates a bit of excitement.
Mhm.
There's a buzz happening, you know. Um,
That was like the first thing I experienced is that I put the first two parties together, the second and first and second party, and I'd done a little thing where two of the characters had met. I ran a one shot where two of the characters had met with Asterion as well. But it was like a happenstance thing where, oh, we had a single interaction, we never exchanged names, and here we are seeing each other again. And the immediate like conversations that started happening, I was like, oh no, I have so many things to get to.
and look at
Which
them.
yeah, which I later had to like kind of get a task for each session and a framing for each session to amend some of that to get kind of everyone on topic
Mhm,
and everyone that if a conversation happens, most likely it's going to happen about the thing that everyone wants to talk about.
mhm.
Um, yeah, just continue.
But I also still just a little bit get it, just because like there's something for me the way that parties come together, right? In the sense that sometimes you get people who are looking for who feel slightly different about games in the same game,
Mm,
which I think is almost harder for me to reconcile than my wants. Um, and I mean that in the sense of like for me, it's easier because I only have two games that run in the same setting,
mm,
and while I do have to be aware of timing because they're technically happening simultaneously, they don't necessarily need to end in the same place.
mm,
There's a possibility they might cross over, but it's not something I have planned. There's information that they may both get, and it may cause them to cross paths. We'll find out. Um, and so because of that, I don't have so much of a focus on time. However, I do have games where I have players who like they're fine to shoot the shit for a session, you know, and kind of be a little goofy. And then I have players who I'm like, I could tell you're here for a purpose. You've got goals. You want to get to stuff. Um, and that's like figuring out, okay, you like how I kind of reconcile between the two. And so sometimes I'm like, I sometimes I even position where I'm like, dude, we spent a whole lot of last session doing fuck all. You better let me get to shit,
mm.
okay? Um, and that's partially dictated by player decisions, and you know
Yeah,
what I mean.
yeah.
But there was something else I was going to say, and it felt important, and now it's kind of leaving me.
Crossover stuff. Me feeling the need to what's the words frustration. That's the thing. I'll add a note, and maybe you'll find your thing here, which is you're as a DM, you're sometimes kind of held hostage by the players on what they want to do, and you're looking at like a lot of the time. I'm gonna do this all the time. If you see me looking in this direction, I'm looking at the time. I'm looking. I'm like, oh, okay. How much time do I have for this thing? And sometimes I'll run
For me,
a
it's this direction.
I'll run a session or rather an encounter, a social encounter usually. And I sometimes in NPC and I'm like, okay, six, we don't have time for me to really give this the attention that it deserves. Um, but again, in the next campaigns, the arcs are going to be set such that there is a lot more free time. It's a lot slower of a build because it'll all
Mm.
be building together rather than um, like each campaign being added on to a thing that's already half built.
Yeah. You've started later in the game, but you got to be here at the same
Yeah.
time that these people got there.
Mhm. So you
And there is
have
a
a
difference.
level 11 party and a level 6 party in the same place. Um,
Yeah. Um, yeah. There is God damn it. I keep having like thought and then it just like leaves my brain. There was something I had to say about nope, that one's gone too. What is wrong with me tonight? Um it
I
was
just
before the thing about the like, okay, do something. Oh, it was a little bit related back to the whole like players doing something interesting,
mm,
you know? Um but sometimes like I can feel the players playing it too, like very safe.
mm.
They're a little too nervous about like you can
Well,
feel they're
the,
just they don't.
it's that, and also it's like there are story rules and game rules that restrict you,
Mhm.
right? We talked
Yeah.
about this last episode, I think, where there's a tone set for a game, and then they follow that tone until something disrupts it, which we didn't talk about disrupting, or at least directly. Um, what's the end of my point? So I can circle back into yours. Um, story rules. Uh, so playing it safe, it's like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do, but it's like there is no supposed to, right? Like there is no supposed to. Oftentimes certain players will be like trying to go to a specific thing, or like trying to find the thing that I'm hinting them towards. And especially in my games, it's like I I'm not sending you anywhere. Go. I'll like start explaining the different ways they can go, and sometimes it's most of the time it's
Yeah.
going the way that.
That's it. That's another thing is that I can pretty much find a way to draw plot on characters regardless of where they are,
Mhm.
right? I'm gonna get you, motherfucker. You
Get you,
cannot run.
motherfuckers.
Um because regardless of whether it's the plot thing I thought I was gonna send you on, it's not like I'm moving it to this other location.
Mm,
But there's relevant shit all over the goddamn country,
mm.
okay? And you will run into it.
That's just good world building.
Yeah. It's just yeah, like teehee. Um but like yeah, regardless of where you go, there's something of relevance to the shit you're dealing with there, you know? Um and so like make whatever decision you want. Um I in my later Saturday game, I gave them like I had them all roll history checks. I could give them all like kind of little separate ideas of like this is what you know about this part of the world and why it might be relevant to what you're doing. You know what I mean? And you guys get to weigh the pros and cons of what places you decide to look in. You know, you guys are trying to solve this problem. Weigh your pros and cons. What's important to you? What do you feel like is important? Shut up. And
Shut the fuck up.
sometimes he just walks around and like yells at the air. I don't know what's wrong with him. He'll like walk around in circles and just but like and that was a really fun thing to like get to see them like kind of talk out like, okay, well, I think we should do this because it's really important, and I think
Mm.
that like this is on its way, so we might as well. And like wherever they would have gone, there would have been stuff. And they get to go through different facets of the story. Sometimes I accidentally pronounce facets, faucets, and Tice. You know what you've done, Tice.
I called
um,
out twice, motherfucker.
and stop. He's trying to get my quesadilla. I think that's why he was yelling. He was like, quesadilla. And to see kind of like what they, were like, yeah, this feels important. You know, this is what I want to go do. This is what we as a party feel like is going to do the thing and get to watch them like make those decisions. And I kind of specified it was like, and these plans could change at any time. You don't have to. You guys are telling me it's playing now. I want you to feel like you have like there's something all over the place, especially with how politically inclined this specific game is. It's just like you go anywhere and it's gonna be an issue still. um, because it affects the everywhere. It's a problem that affects the entire country. And but watching them make those decisions, which most of them were very like thoughtful. This is why we should go there
Mhm.
and why. And the last one they went, that just sounds fucking sick. We just want to go there. And I was like, fair enough. They were like, there's dragon riders? Absolutely. I don't care if it's relevant to plot. I was like, you could, like, somebody rolled low. And I was like, it feels like a fat chance, but, and they were like, no, we're going there. And I was like, I can't wait to see how this plays out. I can't wait to see what their fucking master plan to pull this off is. I'm so excited. There's still plot things, but like, I'm excited to see how, if they can do it. Um, but so like, generally, it's relevant. Um, but also like, well, my characters will engage meaningfully within like um social and cultural constructs of a world, right? And it means that there's certain boundaries they are trepidatious with, they're like, I don't and to some degree I appreciate it, you know what I mean? They get how this world works.
Mhm.
And they're following the rules, so to speak. And then other times I'm like, oh, but wouldn't it be so interesting if you broke them? Um, because I think there's times where it's appropriate for a character to make the choice of like, no, that's not how I'm gonna fucking do things. Sometimes I think it's appropriate for the party to make that choice. Um, and I can feel the nervousness. Like I will like you may gravely punish them. Now, as if it's there is a version of that I would be like, absolutely fucking not. You know what I mean? But if you make the choice thoughtfully and it's not outrageous, I'm not going to immediately like strike you down with the might of God, you know? You're not going to cause like an entire party death.
Yeah. You
It's
always, that's
okay, make
also
the
the other
choice.
thing is that about strong choices, is that as a DM, most of the time, even if it's a bad outcome, it's just like adding a new direction or layer. Right? Like say a party goes and confronts, tries to like assassinate like a minor big bad or mid big bad, and um fails and like gets caught. You're probably not going to TPK the party. Maybe you kill
No.
one of them and then be like you put them in a place where they are stuck, kind of, where they have to do something to keep going, that is an ideal, but it's like a story thing, right?
Yeah.
um so I think that's the
Well,
one thing that players don't know about failure, or about like consequence, is that consequence is bad for characters sometimes, but not
mhm.
bad for the player. The DM's
Yeah.
still trying to make a fun game.
And also, consequences are something that I really enjoy engaging with in a meaningful way.
Mm.
You said there is still a way, okay, like say you break the rules, you get arrested, your party's thrown in jail. Okay, well, now, first of all, everybody loves a little jailbreak. That's fun.
Well, jailbreak.
Second of all, okay, now there's a very fun conversation, in my opinion, a very fun conversation about how these characters just choose to navigate their issues and the world
Mm-hmm.
because of this thing that they have done. um, you know what I mean? And so I think that like the fear around consequences, you're right. It's consequences for the characters are not. It's not like always a bad thing for the players. And I don't try and I very rarely try and frame it that way, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But if anything, I think it is more interesting when the players engage in actions that will cause consequences.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, and I don't just mean like an inherent like get your ass kicked consequence.
Mm.
I just mean like you do a thing, cause and effect.
Yeah. Well,
um,
I had two choices that like the players made in the last 2 3 weeks that like guaranteed death, almost guaranteed death. And for one of them, I was like, just so we're clear, if you do this, I might have to kill you. There's very little wiggle room. And for the other player, it was like a bit more intentional, of like, it was the choice Emily made on Sunday, which
Mhm.
she's a new player, but like that's the power of like new players is like not understanding the rules and limits and asking
Yeah.
for things that are outside the bounds that sometimes make more sense in like the logistical sense. Um, like she asks questions about spells sometimes that uh, would work within the system that I'm designing within Saga, but not within D&D. And so I bend the rules of D&D to be like, well,
Yeah.
how
That's
does
another
this
thing, by the
translate?
way. Is but like breaking the rules of D&D. Is that so I feel like I need to start putting a disclaimer. I don't know if you've gotten players like this. I feel like sometimes I need to put a disclaimer of like if you're like a little rulesy, just know I don't give a fuck about the book. Okay? Fuck this book. I'm gonna throw it in the trash. Somebody goes, "Can I do this?" And I know full well that that's not. I don't fucking care. I don't fucking care. I don't care about the rules. I care about the what the spells. If they go, "Can I do this?" And I think that that's reasonable. My favorite thing in the world to say is, "I'll allow it."
Oh,
That's my favorite. My players' favorite things to hear out of my mouth too is, "I'll allow it." Um,
I'll allow it's a big phrase, but you know it's a more important phrase. I don't think that this phrase also is like excluded from D&D 5th edition. I imagine if you read through the DM's guide, PHP, I've not done that, but I imagine if you do, you probably find the word reasonable there because they are decently fine at being like, you know, bend the rules.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah. You would think that some players and some DMs would be a little bit less like, but the rules say,
mm,
given how much every single fucking D&D book, so one thing I'll give them is like everything is DM's discretion.
mm.
Everything, all of it. Um, they love saying a DM's discretion. It's all of the goddamn place.
But yeah, I navigate through um reasonable, but
Mm-hmm.
also um the way I interpret some rules sometimes. For example, there's a thing with a magic missile
Mm,
being used to break concentration. And I was like, this is an automatic hit spell that hits if you cast it at third level, hits 5 times. Um, but the and Jeremy Crawford has gotten on Twitter and saying, oh, it does result in 5 concentration checks. But I look at it and it says it says they hit simultaneously. And to me, it's like if you're going to have multiple concentration checks, you're going to have multiple disruptions. And being hit by 5 things at once isn't going to cause you to go ooh ah ah ah. It's
yeah.
going to cause you to go ow, right? Um, so I do because the one setback to the game that I'm running in is that you do need to operate within a realm of like, and to be fair, I think it is still reason. I think sometimes players ask questions in order to cheese rules and not to
Yeah.
like expand on them. But the approach always is the same from the player of like, but come on, I can figure this reason. It's
My
like,
big thing is if somebody can come up with a way to creatively use something and it
mm-hmm,
makes sense, I want to reward it if it's in the realm of possibility and if it's reasonable. If they come up with a creative way to do something, I think it's within reason of the world I have created and within reason for them power wise.
mm,
And it's not a little too jacked. And it really has like a meaningful thought process behind like doing that. I would like to reward that. I really enjoy seeing creativity from players. um and and I really love to watch their little brains work. And that's my thing when it comes to like things like spells and stuff like that. If they can come up with something reasonable, I can see the thought process behind it, makes sense,
time to
and
call
it's
out Tice a
creative.
third time. Can I create or destroy water inside a person's lungs? No.
Yeah.
Stop
What the
asking.
fuck? uh and like that's my big thing. Is that so sometimes I really do I've had quite a few players, especially with my home game, come up with some meaningful like, hey, could I try and do this with this spell? Because like you know what and it's like, oh yeah, that's like within reason. That's a really good like thought process for that. Yeah, yeah, I like that idea. And then sometimes it's a little bit more mechanical, like younger Elijah being like, hey, could I use strength for intimidation instead?
Mm.
And I'm like, yeah, you're like 6'8". Sure. I don't think that really has anything to do with your fucking charisma anymore. I
Mm.
think it has to do with the fact that you're 6'8" and scary as shit and you're ripped. And this guy's like a little dude. You're gonna beat his ass. Like, yeah, sure, you real straight for that.
You know
By
what?
all means.
So I have two things to say because that made me think of something. Number one, uh, what I realized as you're talking, what my why I rule things a certain way. Um, Specifically for creating water in someone's lungs. If that was possible, that's all the bad guys would do. That's
Yeah.
all that would happen is that they would show up and go, "Oh, sorry, you are fighting me. Water in your lungs. You're dead."
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. Something I do with my home game players when they do like creative spell things, right? And there's a lot of things that I do in my home games that I wish I could incorporate a little bit more meaningful in my on my paid games, but they're just some things that like translate really different between playing with people and playing online. You know what I mean? And it's
mm,
just harder. Or with strangers, it's just harder. I could talk about it for a while, but that's not the point of why I'm saying this. So I could go into specifics, but where sometimes they'll be like, I want to try and do this. And I'm like, okay. And I still always make them like they've got to roll and make the check and um but sometimes it's like a like explain to me how your character does this because like for me it's not just like they knew how to do this. This is a thing everybody does. It's like explain to me like how they what's the conclusion that they're coming to? How is their brain working through this moment? What does the magic look like there? I want to kind of almost see that moment where like the character has this like sick idea and moves through that. Now, would I ever let them take the water out of somebody's like no. Um uh but there is a space for that kind of thing. You were gonna say something else though, and I cut you off, so continue.
on strength intimidation, because my is when you're talking about that, I was like, I was thinking about Saga and how that might accommodate that, because people in that game, you don't need to take physical traits or social traits. You don't need to take them. You like it's kind of like when you create a character, you're a vague being who does not need to have like negatives or positives. And it's just focus on kind of like what you build. But if you're a character who doesn't have any investment in the social skill tree and just have the physical skill tree, but you are strong specifically.
Yeah,
I
it
was like, how does that
yeah.
accommodate? I do have a thing though, which is I have like I've built out a reputation system, which is like there's kind of five tiers to this. Kind of, a lot of the system is built around like five tiers of play or
I like a
of like
reputation system.
but it's like in each tier you build out a like you it's also what I use, what I intend to use to add stakes to like small moments that might not. It's
Mhm.
you know those moments where something kind of feels like maybe it should have a role, and it's like what
Well,
what
yeah,
happens if
yeah.
bad reputation is the answer to that, of like, oh, if you fuck this up, it's like you otherwise you wouldn't know how to like meaningfully make it tense. It's like cool that person, you have bad reputation, you're gaining bad reputation. But
Mhm.
anyways, so you can earn like five up to five dice in each tier. It's from D4 to D12, and each tier represents like the village level, the town level, the city level, whatever. And once you have a certain amount of dice in each one, you stop rolling for certain things. So if you're a strength character who has gone through and done the things, and you have like five reputation in the lowest one and like five reputation in the one above that, you're not going to have to intimidate a lot of, you're not going to have to roll to intimidate a lot of people. Or
Mhm.
if it is a roll, you add those reputation die. But also if you had bad reputation die, I can be like, well, this is a circumstance where this could play into effect. I'm going to roll these dice. I'm going to take that away. Ooh, 7 and 8 on D8. Um, I'm going to take that away from the thing you roll. And I think that's a sensible compromise of like, this is a thing that you achieve that it is based off of choice
Hmm.
and fits in with that kind of like, can I roll with strength? Because a person with that kind of strength, at least especially in the context of Saga and the way that levels work there, if you're 6'8" and ripped like that, you're going to have reputation to go
Yeah.
with it.
There's with certain characters who kind of, and not just characters who like immediately assume a certain physique, right? But
Mm,
even like in certain parts of the world, like dress a certain way or like based on that culture and the
mm,
type of things that they view as like bad and like, you know what I mean? There's sometimes where I don't even make people roll for stuff like that in certain situations because I'm
mm.
like, yeah, you would scare the fuck out of them naturally. Okay. You walk down the street and they have fear. Look at you. You look so upset all the time. You're 6'8" and you're jacked. And they're just like some rando on the streets. They're some normal guy. They're average as fuck. Their name's probably Joe. Yeah, they're scared. They
It's
don't
probably
want to fuck with
fucking
you.
Joe.
But then there's other times where I'm like, yeah, like you can if somebody provides to me a really good reason to roll with a different, you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
they're like, oh yeah, I'm doing this, but like I kind of want to attempt to do it in this really like this other way. I'll be like, oh okay, well this add this modifier instead based on the way you're trying to do that. Um, you know, and and so stuff like that will also like switch up and change. Uh that again, I the way that I am with the book rules in general is that I will use the like the certain ones that yes will stay the same for the sake of ease and people being able to play the same game with each other. However, there's also lots of things that I'll just be like, nah, not important. Moving on. um, and what the fuck was I about to say? It keeps happening. You're like stealing I something. I don't know. You're doing something.
I'm just so sexy. I got my tattoos out. We started a little bit horny today, and I've been trying to bring the bit back around, and so I'm doing it here. I'm just so
Mhm.
pretty, Tucker. And you're still thinking about that edging comment that I made in the beginning.
I'm gonna shoot you with a gun, an
I'm
American
stealing.
gun.
Oh no, those are the dangerous ones. Those have a lot of guilt on them. Um, and I'm stealing all your thoughts.
I
Um,
cannot believe
because
this.
you haven't embraced the bit. You're losing energy from me.
No. What the fuck? Look, I I ran with the bit a little bit, okay? The
You
problem is I dress
resist.
like
You
a
resisted the bit.
I dress like a bum every day of my life,
Mm,
okay? I'm just a little creature.
mm.
Um I, I have no sex appeal. Look at me. I look like a fucking rat. I live in a trash can. I think at one point there was a conversation between my friends of like what people's personas would be, and like ferret or like weasel, what people decided on for me. Um, uh, which I feel like is right in my heart, you know, like, yeah, I am that little fucking scrunkly guy. Little scrunkle.
Tunkle scrunkle.
Yeah, that's
But
me.
you're losing thoughts.
I
Um,
am. The point is, fuck this book. But
mm.
but there was a point in which there was a reason we started talking about
It was
like
around
kind of like fucking with rules and spells and shit like that. Oh, it's also kind of
decisions,
about
big
that, yeah,
choices.
the big choices, right? And and people making decisions there. um the moral of the core of the message once again um is like I don't want people to feel afraid to engage in consequences
Mm.
and explore that. And I think I have the feeling some of my parties are very like I fear that there's like an effort to do everything right, you know,
Mm.
and make sure they take all the right steps. They do all the right things at all the right times. And I'm like, it's not. First of all, eventually you're gonna fuck up just because you it do, like you know you don't catch on to something and something
Mm.
happens or like you make it, you know.
Yeah, that's the thing. Sorry, real quick. This is on topic, but like it feels kind of scary as a DM when you're putting consequences on for something that they just didn't catch. Because I've done that a couple of times, and it's been exciting. It's worked, but it's like you would prefer if they had initiated it rather than they're missing
Yes.
something.
Yeah. I, I fucking absolutely. Something happened with the session earlier tonight where I'm like, oh fuck yeah. If you pressed a little harder, you could have caught this thing.
Mm,
But I don't want to engage in the consequence because of that, you
mm,
know? But
mm.
it's definitely in existence. It's definitely
I
there. And I
think
set it up a little bit and it wasn't like you didn't reach your little hands in there
yeah,
and knead it and goop it like a like a like bread.
yeah.
And now he is noticed.
Sometimes
But
it's
I rather have you just noticed.
there's in setup. I love talking about setup. That's my big thing is setup. Um, it's my big thing. That's not anything right there. Um, but it's the thing that I think about. I wanted to add some extra words onto that, and I just had nothing. Uh, but setup. And in setting up a threat, I can't remember. Oh, it's a good thing that wasn't caught. Um, was Affadil because that was like sometime I think DMs. Uh, I think there's something to be said about um being more intentional with setting up things that the players don't need to catch because I think that was very effective because if you had caught it because I even like during some sessions I was very intentional about making specific beats that were hit like in the Blessed Ambassador fight, the like first kind of big bad of this campaign had this high level paladin and her partner goes in to fight this dangerous figure and she stops and I described her saying a prayer. It looks like she says a prayer
Mhm,
and continues on. She sent the message cantrip. She used the
mhm.
message cantrip to tell the Blessed Ambassador, don't kill my fucking partner. But nobody,
Holy shit, don't do that.
yeah, nobody
Well, so there
noted.
was no reason to check her, like, or like
Mhm.
at least like from my perspective of the party, there was no reason to assume she was doing anything
Yeah.
other than
And
the
then
thing.
yeah, and then when I was like, oh, she'll take Roybrin, she'll take, and you were like, of course.
Yeah, we
And I
trust her
was,
so
she's
implicitly.
gonna go by herself and take this guy. Um, and then she wasn't around.
It
It
was
was a little
such a
scary.
it was a pretty good backstab though. Like
Mhm.
it was pretty meaningful that I think it doesn't it 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 helps that it was worse not just because like oh yeah we trust Affodil, but it was
Mm.
also because we were watching what it was doing to the other NPC in relation, and that's what got me more than anything else. I was like, oh, I'm like I make and if you have quite a bit of empathy, that's another thing is that like some players just some people have a I can clock in empathetically with pretty much anything.
Mm.
Okay, I can clock in empathetically with a rock. All right. And I can watch like the most dog shit movie to ever exist and be like, no, but I understand why this character was feeling that way, and I feel
Mm.
empathetic towards them. You know, um, I don't like to kill bugs, okay? And so, like for me, it was like oh, I can imagine this feeling, and so like it fucking sucks. It hurts, and that's terrible. But there's something about like us trusting Affodil so implicitly, and also Emily trusting her so like it is that Emily was also like betrayed in this situation. um there is like a further anchoring point into like your trust in this person was not necessarily it wasn't necessarily stupid, like it wasn't like a duh haha you fucked up, it was like yeah that was a reasonable decision and you still got hurt. And sometimes shit just goes like that. It's big suck. um
It was fucking peak roleplay for me. I think those were like the
It
best.
was really good.
Mm,
I can still hear your voice as Emily in my head when she looks at the party and is like, what is it that, like, you know what I mean? That moment, like
that everyone
it
knows that no one
plays.
wants to say.
Yeah. Yeah, that like still can like play, will occasionally just like play in my head and I'll be like, ah, it's terrible. It's like a trauma response. Um, it's
Um,
visceral.
yeah. It was a point with that setup. Um, consequence that is unintended because a lot of time when you do your sessions you're like here's the thing that the party should catch and if they don't catch it now they'll catch it later but I think there's also
And
something to be
that's,
said
yeah.
of like if you don't catch it now um uh but if you just missed it there's a real big flip as a DM you can be like because at that time with Avadil I was like here are the things you missed here's how I make it feel. And so if you go back and be like in these sessions, be like, or whenever you do the reveal, like you miss this, you miss this, you miss this, and here's the consequence. Then players will be like, oh, like they'll get it, right? And so that happened with Alpi's Light as well. Of they so there's another kind of big betrayal where this person they were protecting or were supposed to protect. They're like two figures who were like separate but close by. And by the time they got to check in on the second figure, they had been replaced by someone who had like a little magic thing, a little magic ring. Um, and literally, it was like moments away. And the body of this figure was like maybe 100 feet from where they were. But they even talked about like, do we go check this direction? Nah, it's fine. Um, do we detect magic? No. And I even went to the point of changing the accent of the character ever so slightly, based off of who the imposter was, um, and how they were trying to emulate this accent. And it was just completely missed. And when like the heel turn was put on them, um, it was just like it was so effective. Um, because it was like this setup was good. Like we know we missed something. We understand how we missed something,
Yeah,
and
I did
that's
something like that with my late Saturday game on a smaller level. I do something with the first like couple encounters of every game I run. I didn't realize I was doing it for a minute. I realized when I was doing it in this party. There's something where I'm like feeling out a party when I first started. I'm like, where do you guys sit as a party? And so the first two like encounters that happen are usually like a little bit of a test. It's like me feeling out what the propensity for like empathy and like what the general decision making vibe is going to be, right? It just kind of helps me plan a little appropriately. Like it's never going to change anything too drastically. Um, but it just gives me such like a good like base level, like okay, how I understand this party. um, And I was in a situation like that where they were dealing with like a also like a creature that like changes itself, right? And pretends to be like a this creature pretends to be like a much weaker, more innocent thing. And several times they were like really close. They had like got all the right assumptions together, but were missing like the one thing, right? First of all, if any of them casted detect magic at any time, if the paladin used detect magic even once, I'd be like, it's over. And I was like, we'll see. And not once. Um, and, and not once did did David go, I'm gonna cast detect magic. Even though it was David who would often be like, huh, that's weird. Um, but then it wouldn't like where like eventually this child that they're following, they pass by the area where like the footprints are, and like you can see like the damage as this large creature kind of moves through the woods, and you know it's not like tumbling trees by any means, but like you can see where like things are a little crushed. You know, there's evidence of it being there. It's not usually just like out prowling around. There's a few things. there was like like the first thing was like the barbarian seeing like a bunch of birds like moving out at once. You know what I mean? Like very sudden, like everything like in that concentrated spot, everything is now disturbed, right? There is an upset. And they finally get to the place where they saw that happen. They like approach the location and they ask her, and she's like, "Yeah, this is where like it chased me." And I even like say, like, yeah, you see these larger foot, and I describe what these creature footprints look like. And then I say, and then you see her, and then right after, you see her little child footprints. The footprints are, I said, right after. You see them after this point. I didn't like overly emphasize it, but I
Mhm.
definitely phrased it in a way that if somebody was like
Paying
really
attention.
paying attention and like had a very suspicious mind. Nobody was suspicious. I think they'll probably be more suspicious of me in general
Mm.
going forward.
Mm.
But nobody was suspicious enough of me to be like, hey, wait a second. My home game players would be like, nah, I don't trust you, motherfucker. Um, but like these players were like, oh, and then David's like, well, it's obviously like an ambush predator, and it didn't approach us when she joined our group because it's trying to corner people. And the thing is that at the time that this like creature approached, the barbarian was alone. And then he did something that was very loud and obvious, and that made this creature realize, like, oh shit, he's not alone.
Mm.
um, Love Rock. But like he puts together, he's like, like, yeah, it's obviously an ambush predator, like it's waiting for to like get people alone, and so we can't separate and da 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 da. And just like completely like, and I was like in my head, I was like, maybe it's just because I wrote it that I feel like I'm being obvious, maybe
Mm.
it's just not that obvious. And then when the thing happened, I was like, yeah, you like, you could have, if you detected magic at any point, immediate, but also like this thing and this thing and this thing. And also, I give them hints when they return this child to the man supposedly who this child belongs to. He looks confused, and they were like, "Yep, that's your kid." And I was like, "Yeah, he looks kind of he doesn't, he looks like confused. He's like doesn't understand." And they like, "Yeah, that's your child." I mean, now it was the terrible reveal that that child that the creature was mimicking his child who had gone missing like 3 weeks ago. And so there was like this that played well with the party, more than like the actual like the thought of like the betrayal. Like it was the part about like, oh wow, we just gave that man so much false hope. Like
Mm.
for a minute he thought maybe, and then it was just like absolutely ripped from him. And they definitely had a plan where they were like, oh well, maybe we shouldn't go straight there, maybe we should go talk to like the guy we're trying to talk to, who's kind of like, you know the, for lack of a better term, the mayor. And then we would talk to him first. He could deal with the situation, which if they would have done that, he would have been like, that, no. But because they went to this guy first, there was just like this terrible domino effect of like this man like having to like watch the image of his dead child turn into this terrible beast and like wreak havoc and bloodshed. Um, and like grieve all over again. But just every single time they were just like, "Yep, this is normal," and I was like, "No, it's not."
This is just a regular day. This is a normal day.
um, but they were pretty. There was a moment of like, "Damn, we did not need to do that to that guy." They were like, "I really hope he's okay." I'm like not super
A
fucked
real
up.
Agarad situation.
Yeah, real accurate situation. Poor guy.
Agarad was a merchant in the Bunky sessions who basically surveil. Also, this it. I don't think about surveil's setup enough. How much it fed into the like um other not even yeah, that's like the first arc and even like the other game like coming up with the character of Roy Rin. But anyways, Tucker's character was blackmailing a merchant because he's doing shady shit and basically came to this random other merchant shop who wasn't doing well and was like, you're gonna give this guy stuff for cheap prices or free. um and then there was an attack right in front of that shop. but he still got his stuff and he became successful, maybe a little bit. But it's just like this poor guy, all his stuff just falls into his lap. Um,
And then
I hate taking
mm,
up space as NPCs.
yeah,
And I also feel like,
I understand that feeling very well,
yeah,
but
I
also motherfucker.
NPCs, and we talked about this off podcast as well, while we are doing Minecraft. But NPCs, uh, for me, engage. Typically, they're part of the theme, right? And Abby does not have a current role in the short term of the theme. I think where that character is going, I think like what he's doing right now is he's like learning. But I don't think he has a lot to say. And also, the people that he would usually provide advice to aren't experiencing problems for him to solve. And so him as a it doesn't make as much sense for me to show up in a session as a character. Like I tried to use him as a bit of a device to get maybe a conversation about hope started. That they just kind of threw it in a session. I don't feel it worked super well, like
Mm,
4 or 5 weeks ago. But what's this thing? I don't feel like me just showing up because I also don't really think about how Abby's feeling because that's like the least important thing.
yeah, in
Um,
the grand scheme of things,
yeah, unless someone brings
when you
him a
zoom
feeling.
out, it's like, yeah.
Mhm.
I think the last thing he did, just talk to Lorna a little bit.
Yeah, and that was like needed and important and like showed his kind of role. Like no one else has really needed that. Um, maybe I could. There's not been space for him to show up and like check in with people because it also like it doesn't feel like it would be received with all the characters present. Um, because and that's also a thing of certain players being missing. Which is kind of what some people would want to
Yeah.
talk about, and you get in a place where it's like, well, we can't talk about that.
Bunky's in
Um,
a weird spot right now.
Bunkies, bunkies, in some funkies.
Bunky is in some Bunkies, which I have more thoughts about. However, they're not super pertinent to the
Mhm.
podcast. But I did have so maybe I'll when we end, I'll annoy you for like 10 minutes about it. But my brain had the thought of like, "Ah, we should just like podcast while we play Minecraft one day. It'll just be like a recording of us playing Minecraft. I feel like it would be
The
really fun.
ADHD.
Like, so it's like ASMR, like Minecraft ASMR. We talk about D&D while we play Minecraft. It's just soft, like chopping tree sounds. We can um we can like pop into a server and like make a really basic house. We won't discuss it at all before. We'll just yes and the house, but very
Mm,
silently. Like we don't
mm,
acknowledge that the house is happening. We're busy.
mm.
We're talking about D&D.
Yeah.
They're just like autopilot into like making this house. I was like, oh, that would be such a. I feel like I would find that relaxing on a deep level. Um, ah, but yeah, no, Bunky's in a weird spot. Bunky's in a weird place. And I mean, I would really like to see it play out in a satisfying way before it ends, but we're also so close to the end, and I'm like,
Mm.
fuck.
I think um it's just not the things that you'll think it is. I think there's something satisfying there. I obviously can't say it. You're gonna discover a lot about it on Sunday, through the last crossover, and the emissary and everything that's happening there. Um, but on Abby, to get it back to kind of an advice standpoint, um,
Mm,
as it will actually, um, as a player, because I don't often get this reflection. So Abby's like an important NPC. Um, I'll explain what Abby was to me when I made him.
yes. Give me
Um,
the insight.
yeah, and then I would like you to kind of tell me why he's still here. um, so Abizat, at the start of the Bunky Fuel campaign, um, uh, he was meant to be a tie to tieflings, the tiefling culture, and into the conflict, someone who could provide a little bit of context, but was never really meant to take up like space. He wasn't a character who necessarily um, had any importance on him. Like when I made him, his uncle was not the blessed ambassador. There's always a blessed ambassador. It wasn't anyone in particular. It was a dude in a mask. Might not have had a face underneath. Um, and in the first session, after the first attack that we talked about with Surveil and Roirin and Agrad, attack happened in this market square that the first members of the Bunkakule happened to be there for. Abby um, came together or got these people and was like, I know what's happening, or I think I know what's happening. Um, Come with me and let's talk about it. Because the players weren't really doing that. So I was like, oh no, I need something to like kind of push these guys a little bit further and get them to ask a question about the thing that's happening because nothing was really happening. Um, and then he became the device to just push you guys forward. Because you weren't doing
Yeah.
it super hard yourselves.
No, we
Um,
weren't.
so what happened between that and like um Surveil developing feelings um that like made him a mainstay?
Um, so the A, that that party, at least from the beginning, there was one part thing that was a thing about that party is that we were silly, goofy guys.
Mm,
Um, and I think that you caught that energy and was like, oh, we're gonna be
mm,
like a little silly and goofy. And there was like a couple things that Abby, like a couple little jokes from Abby that were like everybody's like, haha, nice. And that's just like the beginning of like endearment. You know what I
mm,
mean? Of making an NPC likable. It doesn't necessarily make an NPC a mainstay, more as just like it starts the process of like, oh, this is very endearing to me. I think it doesn't help that the bunkie is like, they're all also like me. Develop empathy for a rock.
mm,
And except for the dead body that's still in that to
mm.
this day.
So there
Still
was
in
a
the cellar.
player who left immediately who just was not a good fit for the game, should have read the description. um uh who was killed off in the start of the second session because they left and their body's not been dealt with, just rotting in Venudry. Anyways, continue.
Christ. Um, and I think the other thing, right? Which first of all, when I think in hindsight about that moment for Surveil when like things happened with Roy Rand and Agrad and all that, Surveil's like stupid little twink brain being like, ah, I guess he tried to kill me. Whatever though. A weird way of flirting. um but like I think what kind of like happened in that transition was was oh, what was his name? Sinatrat? Uh,
The
when they
uncle.
went, no, I know your mother. Abby knows his mom. When they went and they
Oh,
found where Roy Rand does his weird cult
the
shit.
cult guy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think like that moment for Abby was just like so like
Mm,
such like an emotional touchstone of his character, you know? Um, that like I think that's what shifted the tone, right? And then
mm,
there may have been a little bit of like this guy's funny, we like him. And then that happens and it's like, oh, it's not funny right now.
Yeah.
It's sad actually. And this funny guy that we like because he's a funny little guy, is experiencing a pain.
Mm,
We don't like that. Or like not even just like a pain necessarily, but like this is like something that affects his character deeply. And I think that it was a very like strong way to really endear this character and their conflicts to the party. Especially with a party like Bunky, where like a big thing about Bunky is that these characters are pulled not just by their own like Savale wanted to like where they ended up trying to go, like between their two decisions. Savale one that was really important to Lorna because he has a very strong connection to Lorna,
mm.
you know. And like a lot of this, quite a few Bunky decisions have come down a little bit to like this is really important to this one person. I really care about them and their pain. I reflect that. I feel that. And so the party I think did naturally have a little bit of a disposition towards like pursuing things because of how important they are to those that they care about. And so before that they even like yeah they knew it was bad before they knew how bad it was going to get. That
Mm.
was kind of like enough to be like yeah fuck yeah we're fucking doing this.
I
All
think
right, we're fucking. And I do remember that being like one of the first points where the party really sat down and was like, I guess yeah, fuck yeah, I'm gonna put my whole fucking I that's not appropriate. Um,
whole pussy into this. Was that?
um, I often say the phrase, I'm gonna put my whole cock and ball into it. Uh, and I almost like just spouted that out.
Hey,
uh,
this is not a PG-13 podcast.
but it was a really connecting moment, not just to Abby, but for the party, and
Mm.
that I really think cemented his deal in there. um, I think that was a big thing.
I think I figured out what I'm looking for here with NPC, which is because Philia, again, a lot, I've said this on the podcast before, but a lot of NPCs are representative of some kind of theme. I'm here to help communicate forgiveness or hope or etc. And Abby, in that moment, humanized the tiefling side of the conflict
Mm-hmm.
and gave you a perspective because that's always been the role of tieflings in this setting is to be like there are good people who come from bad things. They escaped through the crystalline caverns um, when everything went up in when this empire collapsed 60 years ago. They escaped from hell into this plane and hid away, not knowing what was out in the world. And this other thing has emerged from that, or used that to emerge. Um, and so Abby was humanized the conflict, and I think I intentionally, um, with his uncle, had him take responsibility and be kind of the heart and leader of the party. Not to like take away agency from the players, but just because like the Bunky spent more time role playing it, they kind of needed someone to just be like, let's go to point C and D. Um, but I think more importantly than for NPCs communicating theme, but humanizing an element of the story,
Mm-hmm.
um, is maybe a good touchstone for because I don't think I've had that purpose or as purposefully in any of the that's not true. I yeah, as purposefully I should say because I have had that in RFO in the other uh uh groups. There are characters that have humanized things, but I wasn't doing that intentionally. And Emil I think embodies, even though he's a demigod, I think he's the most human character. And the way he interacts with the world, I think he humanizes everything because that's the kind of place of his religion and his culture in the world. Um, but yeah, I think I did all those things accidentally. Um, that's very interesting to think about because I am thinking about always thinking about the next arc, the next campaigns, and what are the characters I'm going to place. And it's going to be slower paced. So why are player characters going to interact with um, uh, NPCs? And looking back on what failed in Falia, it was because some NPCs were plot and some NPCs were human. And I'm just kind of putting that together. Um,
Mhm.
Interesting. Do you have any finishing thoughts about Abby?
Um, you would ask why he's around now.
Mm. I
And
think he's just stuck
it's
with
a
the party.
very simple, well, I think it's a very simple thing of like it would be weird if he fucked off, you
Yeah,
know? It
he's
would be like,
Surveil's
where are you
boyfriend.
going, motherfucker? Exactly. Because then it would kind of be like he fucks off, and then Seville would be like, well, I guess I'm leaving. Bye.
Yeah. If you wanted
uh,
to fuck up the buggy, you'll just be like, yeah, so Abby's leaving.
yeah, and then Seville would be like, oh, okay. I gotta go, I guess. That's like the biggest thing right there. That being said, I don't know. It leads me into a lot of thoughts about Surveill's bullshit right now. Um, and like his his worms. Everybody's got a little worms.
I think it's very interesting thing about Abby through this because I was still hitting those notes of humanizing tieflings through him when as he was connecting to it. Like I knew intuitively the purpose of the tieflings and what they're doing, and in bringing him into the meaning of the monarch, and having that like city be mentioned of like we're going to build a city for the tieflings. We're going to have proper representation. They're going to be part of our collective culture.
Mhm.
And I think because I've been thinking about like Abby, he is going around and he's trying to learn all of the ways of each faith. And I think I know where his story is going in the long term. But I think
Mhm.
he's become like for me, a like long game character. Like his story is like his major arc is like beginning and will take like the next 40 years of his life to complete. Is where I'm kind of seeing him, and maybe I'm having troubles because like he doesn't really
Mhm.
have it. When you're learning about hope or like a religion, you're not going to learn how to be like a good Christian or a good like Muslim
Yeah.
in 3 weeks of travel.
Yeah.
um Anyways, I have plans, but I'm not going to spoil them. I'll tell you
That's
them as soon as we end the podcast. But I think that's probably a good time to end the podcast. We have talked for at least 2 hours.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Folks, this has been the Story of the Prince podcast. A little podcast about D&D. Sometimes it gets a little um, moist in here. I am one host, Jesse T. William. With me, as always, is
Punk. Punk? Sorry, I have to say it like punk. Can't stop punk, get punk.
pretty weak delivery, man. I don't know.
I